Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Let's introduce everyone to, we have some new people on. Let's just go through and Debbie, why don't you start?
Well, all right. It's Debbie Ward from Barrhead, Alberta, Canada. Minus 20 degrees here today, Jackie, just so you feel sorry for me a little bit. Yeah, it just all of a sudden took a dive yesterday. But I've had a holistic practice for 22 years, and before that I was a pharmacist for 21. So I've been on both sides of the stick, and yeah, it's definitely a better place to be on this side.
How about Dr. Gluckman?
Kitchen cooking.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ahrens, I'd like to introduce you to, we have a lot of new docs on the line here and some old docs that's been in with Galen for a while. I'd like to just start out with, I'm Dr. Dave Nelson, and like to start out with you, Dr. Ahrens, to give us the story of Emuin, how it got started, and we have a dysfunctional problem here, and it's called sugar, the sugar issue, metabolic disease. If you could start out with this and give us your the history of how it got started.
Okay, I'm glad to do that. I want to ask if you can hear me good right now. Is it good?
Yes.
Because
good here.
I keep getting a signal flashing up that my internet connection is unstable. So you let me know, and then if so, I'll switch to a landline.
Okay, we can hear you right now.
Okay, so I'm in Puerto Rico right now, so this is Atlantic time, 12 noon. I'm glad to be here. I hope I don't bore people with my stories that I've told them so many times, but I'm glad to see a lot of people coming on board and to know this story. You know, I have learned this story along with everyone else because like a lot of researchers, you start out looking at something and it ends up being entirely different than what you start out looking for. This is a story that actually started with trying to sell grapefruit. I had been the research leader, the director of engineering and technology for Green Giant, and I had recently joined the Florida Department of Citrus as the research director. And the problem was given to me to increase sales of grapefruit, believe it or not. So I started talking with some of my and some people in the industry, and they said, you know, as silly as it seems, every time that old grapefruit diet story comes back through the press, you know, eat a bunch of grapefruit and drink a bunch of black coffee, we sell a lot of grapefruit. Why don't we, let's do a real test to see if it's true or not. There was a lot of resistance because what if we had discovered it was not true? That would not have been good for the grapefruit industry. But I convinced enough people that we ought to go ahead and do this. And we got a bunch of grapefruit and grapefruit juice and dehydrated grapefruit powder. We sent them out to Scripps and California, and they did a test on people that had a metabolic syndrome. Basically, they're almost diabetic and they're overweight. Well, they lost weight after about 3 months. They lost weight. This is a published study. Anyone that wants any of these references that I might mention, just drop me an email and I'll give you the specific references. So this is a published story by Dr. Ken Fujioka that said, you know, just putting grapefruit in your diet is causing these people to not only lose weight, but to have their whole physiology change. Their insulin response was different, and the glucose, and several other markers. So great news, and I wanted to find out what it was all about. So I went to the leaders of the Department of Citrus and said, let's find this out. And they said, well, we're not interested. We got the information that it works. We're not interested in finding out. Well, I was just, I guess, maybe I don't know if it was for my own good or bad for me. I just couldn't stand that. So I actually left the Department of Citrus, and it was swore to find out what it was in this fruit that was causing these changes. So one of the guys who cooperated with me on that study, who provided the grapefruit powder, Daryl Thompson, he and I wrote a book on grapefruit and all this stuff we found out about it, and we went on a book tour, and it ended up giving us a little funding, and we started a company called ATM Metabolics, which you have before you right now. I'm the CEO of that company. And we started looking into the problem of finding out what was in grapefruit. And it took us several years. We identified 10,000 possible candidates, believe it or not. They're all flavonoids. There's thousands and thousands of flavonoids. And then there was a lot of literature starting to come into the scientific community at that time saying, you know what, I think these bioflavonoids, these polyphenolics really are doing the trick for not just weight loss, but for controlling all types of diseases. And we started, every time we found out there was a fruit or an herb or vegetable that was working to kill and to help people with disease, we usually traced it back to it was the bioflavonoids. It wasn't just the antioxidants. It was the bioflavonoids. So then we moved into some more difficult research. We started modeling these molecules. How can they really be causing a change in weight loss and blood sugar? What are they actually doing? So we listed the Brandeis University's database of enzymes. Is actually called BRENDA, Brandeis Research Enzymatic Database. And this is a database that has the characteristics of every enzyme that man has ever studied. Just like the Human Genome Project. If you're doing research on an enzyme, you get some data, researchers will donate that to this database. So if you as a researcher or a doctor or whatever want to look at an enzyme, you can use the data free of charge from Brandeis University. It's up to you to figure out what you're going to do with it. So we took these thousands of compounds, and most all their strains are very well known, like myristicin, quercetin, chlorogenic acid, and on, epigalic acid, catechotin, you name them. And we developed an algorithm, and we used a supercomputer at UCLA and one of them in Switzerland, IPAN. And we just basically dumped these enzymes into the algorithm in the computer, in the laptop, did an overnight connection to the supercomputer at these two places. And in the morning, we got some solutions. And then and those solutions were, well, this could happen, this could be happening, or something else could be happening. So then we looked at it again, and we dumped them in the next day. And so that process took us around 3 years. And we came up with a set of polyphenolics that appeared at that time to completely regulate carbohydrate chemistry. It was not as simple as, eat grapefruit and lose weight. Take green coffee bean extract, lose weight. That's just a really tiny part of the puzzle. These molecules apparently we've grown up with them with the plant world. So we have co-evolved, or we were co-born or co-created with these plant molecules to use in our carbohydrate regulating mechanisms. So that's really important. Probably as far as a medical or person, doctor, researcher, this is the most important part here. It's just like getting amino acids from nature, essential amino acids, and eating them, and then incorporating them into your body, either as, as protein, which then become enzymes, which then controls life. So it's not, there are other systems. I mentioned that to show there's other systems just like this. So we have a situation where we are getting molecules and fragments of molecules in our diet, which our bodies are using to regulate carbohydrate metabolism and inflammation. So it's like any other thing. Vitamin C, you get vitamin C outside of your body, and it's used to regulate calcium in your body, as well as like vitamin D. That's even better for calcium. That shows that's pretty tight regulation. Vitamin D is used to manage calcium uptake and manipulation in your body. Well, we have a set of compounds, some molecules that at least for mammals regulate carbohydrate metabolism in the body. That's the big discovery. Well, we didn't have any idea about that in 2007. We were just trying to go for some weight loss. It was a fascinating project to find out what was in the product. By the way, we found out that grapefruit was not alone. It was most all tropical fruits, all tropical berries are really high in these compounds. And also non-tropical fruits and vegetables, but tropical berries seem to be evolutionary, at least have the greatest concentration of these compounds. And so let's say there's and each plant that has a high carbohydrate load, like it's not a berry, but that's one example where this does exist. Each, or a dark berry, maybe better, a muscadine grape or a currant. They have compounds. The higher the sugar, and they're there along with the sugar. And so now, as I look back on that, it's a simple story. I get why that is, and I'll mention that in just a moment. But we found out during this survey that absolutely grapefruit was not alone. It was all of these products from tropical origin that had these sugar, what we're calling now sugar chaperones, carb managers. And some of them had a different one than another. They're not all the same. Let's say a family of around a couple of hundred of these sugar chaperones, and a mango might use a lot of one of them, and then an orange might have a different ones. But they're all cousins. They have really similar properties in the body, but we've moved way past grapefruit. So now we just focus on the molecule itself. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Just like vitamin C can come from acerola, citrus, rose hips, it's still ascorbic acid. It's still vitamin C. And so it's like if you took vitamin C, you could technically say you're taking citrus extract or rose hip extract. But everyone knows it as vitamin C, and you don't say that. Well, this is what we're doing now here with iGalen. We have to tell where we got it from, so we're saying muscatine grape extract. But we're really talking about myristotin, pure 96 to 97% myristotin. And it's all that's in it, but it's called a grape extract. So we found these three that together overlap so that they completely manage the whole chain of carbohydrate metabolism. Now you could say that there's 10 steps in carbohydrate metabolism, or 5 steps, or 7 steps, or 8 steps. Just depends how you want to, where you want to draw your line in the sand, because metabolism, as all you people know, doesn't ever have an end. Even after you die, your body decomposes, metabolism just keeps going on. But we've kind of identified 7 steps to carbohydrate metabolism that we're trying to control. And they're simple so people can understand them. One of them is, the first one is in your mouth. That's amylase, that's in your saliva. There's other amylase in your body, but it starts in your mouth. And that's where starches first hit amylase, and it starts digestion right there. So we've got starch in anything that you consume, like a bread or an endosperm in a wheat berry, a berry, by the way, or down your throat into your pancreas, your gut. That's amylase. So that's the first step. Control, regulate amylase. The breakdown of simple complex sugars, such as a starch, into the very simplest sugars, the monomers, glucose being the number 1. Then the next step is in your gut, in your stomach lining, where it starts. And then, by the way, there is no acidic breakdown of sugar in your gut. It's all enzymatic, all protein. Then you go into the gut lining itself. There are transporters. There's actually doorways. Active transport of glucose into your blood. And in that, when you say glucose transporter, it's not one simple door. So there's like 4 different steps, and there might be more. But there's like, you can imagine that it's like a door, and then it's locked, and then there's a doorknob, and then there's a key, and then you got to turn it. That's kind of how it works. But it ends up being vitamin C actually uses one of these same doorways, by the way. But glucose goes up, is recognized, and all those things happen. The key is put in, it's inserted, the doorknob is turned, the door is pulled open. Actually, the door rotates, and glucose is drawn into the bloodstream. Pretty cool. Really cool, actually. And there's a glucose transporter at different tissue. There's a glucose transporter 2 in the stomach line, the intestine lining, the gut lining. And there's a glucose transporter 4, which is in muscle and brain tissue. Two different glucose transporters that are regulated by 2 different molecules, enzymes. So that's the second step. Glucose transport from the gut lining into the blood and then the next step is carbohydrates getting into fat tissue for storage. Another one is getting into muscle tissue and brain tissue. Then there is the regulation of insulin. Insulin shows up whenever there's a high load of glucose in the bloodstream. It's just not there all the time. And it does not show up if there's just low levels of glucose. That's a real important step. If you have a lot of glucose, then you get insulin tearing out, being actually transcribed and translated. It's made on the spot. It's not stored. And it puts its primary, it has a lot of responsibilities, but its primary responsibility is to put sugar into fat tissue. And then there's the generation of new sugar. And that is, if your body ever runs out of glucose, your liver will make sugar, gluconeogenesis. That's a booger, because if you have high blood sugar, and you've had high blood sugar for a long time, your body recognizes whatever that level is as normal, homeostatic. It's called homeostasis, because your body wants to stay the same. It wants to stay the same weight. It wants to stay the same amount of sugar in your body. It wants to stay the same height, everything. Your body tries to keep regular. If it gets too cold outside, your body produces more heat. If it gets too warm, it sweats. It's trying to keep the same temperature. The same thing with your blood sugar. So you have a blood sugar, you know, if, let's say your normal is 120, you're definitely diabetic. And you do something to lower that blood sugar and you're successful and you're able to bring it down to 110 or 105, your body does not like that. So it makes new sugar to reintroduce sugar into your bloodstream to get it back up to 120. I would say this is the #1 reason people have difficulty with diets outside of the psychology part is their body does not want to lose weight, does not want it. And it will fight you in every single instance it can to maintain whatever weight you are. 1 stone, 2 stone, 100 pounds, 200 pounds. It wants to stay there. So you have to let your body recognize a new normal of lowered blood sugar. And as you all know, blood sugar is directly correlated with weight. I mean, this is one of the highest correlations in nature. It does not mean that it's a direct cause and effect, but it's pretty doggone close that if you have high blood sugar, you will be overweight. And if you can lower your blood sugar, you will lose weight. And in combination with free fatty acids, that's how your body regulates itself. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback through things like leptin, hunger enzyme, but this is the #1, and your body is going to resist it. Then the last 2 points of the last point of the 7 steps of carbohydrate regulation are the insulin sensitivity, and that's type 2 diabetes if it's too tough. But even most people have a little bit of insulin insensitivity, so then the body makes more and more insulin. And you get too much insulin, and then too much insulin causes other problems. So those are the 7 steps that we determined. Actually, we talked with Ralph DeFranzo, who's probably the leading diabetes researcher in the world. He actually introduced metformin to the world. We were talking to him about that, and we actually independently came up with this 7-step. He believes there's 8. That's okay. There could be 10 or whatever, but how we happened to divide them up, there were 7 for us. And he likes 8. Okay, great, Ralph. You can have all those 8. So what was wonderful is that we found this in our laboratory in Florida, independent of Ralph DeFranzo, who is a medical advisor, by the way, on our group. So that gave us a lot of confidence that we were on the right track. We need to control these 7 steps because it's just controlling one of them. The body will compensate. Like I said, it will overcompensate. It will get around these control points if it can figure it out. So metformin is its concentration, its #1 concentration is to shut down gluconeogenesis, the production of new sugar. That's its #1 spot that it works on. And that's good. It works, but the body figures out a way around it. If it didn't, we wouldn't have any more diabetics. Think about that. We have no treatment for diabetes, and we're prescribing a drug that is just treating symptoms. It's amazing. I don't know how we let ourselves get by with this as a medical community, but we have not cured diabetes in these decades and decades since we knew it. And it seems like a pretty simple solution, actually. Physiologically, now it may not be psychologically, I recognize other issues here, but physiologically, unless there is some physical trauma,
people and just
you can
confirm.
cure diabetes. I mean, I'll say that to anyone's face. Unless there's a physical trauma and a physical insult, such as a damaged pancreas or a loss of genetic material so that you cannot actually make some other enzymes, diabetes is curable, but it's difficult. It's a hard thing. So we started, I brought you in this talk up.
Hey, David, mute, go to the chat and mute the number I told you to mute, please. David, thanks.
I brought you all up to around 2008. And I hope this hadn't bored you, because it was, you know, it was kind of boring back in my office in the days we were just sitting for the work to come back from those supercomputers until we could go on to the next step. But the story is quite fascinating, because we found out there are these vitamin-like products, molecules in plants that have a high carbohydrate load that apparently are meant to be consumed with sugar so that your body can best utilize them. So, you know, we've discovered a vitamin. I'm pretty sure of it, but it's never will be recognized as a vitamin ever since 1994, because the FDA in the US made that illegal. If you have a product now that will cure or address a disease, even attenuate it, a response, you must register it as a drug. It's really interesting. You're not required to register it, but you can't use it. So if you say, hey, this here stops diabetes, and then you sold it, well, they would get you for the breaking law for not registering it as a drug, because you didn't turn in a new drug file on it, a new drug application, an NDA. And then if you do claim it to be a drug, they will not bother you there. They say, okay, but then they'll get you because you're using a drug that's not registered. So you either can or you can't. You're not going to do it either way. So we don't care about those tech terms and technology. We've got something that would change people's lives. It's part of food. It's in every food already, just in real small amounts. So we got further, we did computer modeling, and now we know how these enzymes and their substrate hook together. We actually know where is myristotin on that molecule. Why does myristotin, which just has 3 hydroxyl units on it, why is it different than quercetin that has 2 hydroxyl? And it's because of how they fit in this particular valley of some of the enzymes. So myristotin can't fit here, but quercetin can fit there. The little things like that, the little charges on that molecule, another one will come over on the other side and go underneath and inhibit that protein. So sometimes we got a stimulation, and other times we got an inhibition. So that's basically the story of how all about blood sugar, where we got there. And then along the way, we found that, well, sugar is a drug itself. It stimulates the same spots on the brain that drugs do, talking about recreational drugs. And I see you, John, and several of you nodding your head there. It just hits up like heroin. And this is really interesting. How many here want to raise their hand and say we have an opioid crisis? Yeah, we all have but they're so small. It's such a small crisis. We got a sugar crisis that is, if you tried to blow up the amount of people who have issues because of sugar and are ruining their lives, and they're dying, and right next to the opioid, you couldn't see the opioid crisis to get all that other data on the graph. I mean, it's amazing, people. We're killing ourselves, and I am not a health nut. I'll tell you what, I'm the last guy on the planet that's a health nut and a tree hugger. I am just a physiologist, and sugar's killing us, and I'm myself to blame. I mean, I like it much. I don't eat as much as most of you, I'm pretty sure, but I sure do like some pasta here and there, etc. That's just pure sugar. So sugar's a drug, and furthermore, it's even worse than some drugs because it leads to inflammation. It actually the sugar in your bloodstream causes a series of events that are inflammatory in nature because they're trying to get rid of that poison. Your body doesn't really know it's sugar. It just knows it's killing itself. So it sends out the troops, and the first reaction is inflammation. You know, that's inflammation's been known a long time, but 2,000 years ago, Galen, who we all know, said, hey, he added that last step, you know, inflammation. What is it? Redness, it's heat, and it's swelling, and it's pain. And that was well known. Those are the classic ways you tell inflammation. Sounds really simple, doesn't it? But that's still today how you figure out inflammation. And then the last one Galen put on there, he's a loss of function. He was the guy that figured out this continuing inflammation leads to loss of function. And then he devoted a quite bit of his life into figuring out how to regulate inflammation. And he's had all kinds of different inflammations. Well, he was a little bit off there, but he had it right. Inflammation, chronic long-term inflammation causes loss of function, destruction of blood vessels, nerve systems, linings. Epithelial cells are abraded and abused and destroyed. And because of that, you have most diseases known to man are caused originally by inflammation, or you could have been born that way. Certainly we know that your body could have a souped up immune system and you get inflammation on anything. But most people, these diseases are caused by inflammation. You know, asthma, the lining of your lungs is the epithelial that is inflamed. Many nervous issues are because your nervous system, the insulation has been worn off of them, actually attacked. That's Parkinson's as an example. You're short circuiting. These are not mysteries. And then, of course, psoriasis and hay fever, and the list is on and on. These are all inflammatory responses. Your body is just trying to get rid of some kind of poison, and it doesn't know where it is and where to attack, so it just attacks everything. Does that sound unusual? Well, no, it's not. Do you know we have a flu epidemic going on right now in the world? Do people know that? It's one of the worst flu seasons the world has ever seen. We've had 23 children die this season, and that's terrible. But you know, in 1918, but somewhere between 50 and 100 million people died the world over from the flu. And the only thing was different in that particular strain was that the body's immune system attacked that flu virus so powerfully that it tore itself up. I mean, think about that. The immune system was working perfectly. It did a great job, but it sent out all the troops, and it did two things. It exhausted itself, and it tore up everything. It's like throwing a hand grenade in a grocery store to get rid of a rat. That's what your body was doing. And so you died from bleeding, internal hemorrhaging. People died in a matter of hours of contract. 1918, I suggest everybody look that up, because it's just amazing that many people could die over the world. And so it was just because it was a voracious, our immune system did such a good job, it killed ourselves. So this is what's happening with the Ebola virus, by the way. I worked on that Ebola virus for a while for the U.S. government a couple of years ago. Ebola is just a flu that's got a souped up way to melt your, it actually gets rid of cell cohesion factor. You know, we're not smart enough to know what these things are, so that's how we name stuff. The glue between cells, it's called cell cohesion factor, and Ebola ends up causing a loss of that, and you basically melt. And it's a souped up inflammatory response that helps that process. We actually aid the virus not only to produce itself, but we aid it in destroying our cells. So these are not unknown. Your immune system is turned on and gives you diseases long term. That's what Galen came up with. You eventually have in diabetes a neuropathy. You know, basically the ends of your nerves die. Why would they die? Just because sugar is in your, what do you think's going on here? You got a bunch of sugar floating around in your blood, but your tissue starts to just deteriorate just from that high concentration of sugar, because it causes a generation of free radicals that are like, you know, chemically, it's like steel wool going around everywhere and scrubbing you raw inside on the molecular level. It's a good way to explain it. It's really more like a vacuum cleaner. It's going around sucking away oxygen and hydrogen. It's sucking away hydrogen from everywhere it can find, and trying to make water, H2O. So it's a bunch of OHs floating around trying to pull hydrogen from everywhere, and then leaves it's like pulling the damn mortar out of a brick wall, and then your body dies. You know, this sounds, oh, all this complicated stuff. Well, you know, it can be complicated, but it's back to a simple situation. Too much sugar leads to inflammation because your body thinks it's a poison. And then that is why we have all these issues with diabetes, because your body's trying to get rid of it. So it sends out insulin. Insulin at first tries to stick it into fat tissue, not only for a storage method, but also because it's sticking it in there just like it would a heavy metal. That's where heavy metals end up, in fat tissue, to be quarantined so they can't cause trouble. So it starts ending up sticking glucose into fat tissue, forms it into fatty acids, sticks it into fat tissue, and it still doesn't work. You're still getting this poison. You know, your body doesn't know it's because you're eating it in your mouth. It looks around and thought it got rid of the sugar. No, you're still bringing the poison in. So what's its next step? Okay, we got to stop processing this sugar. Quarantine it didn't work. So what we'll do is we'll make the body less sensitive to insulin. All right, now you have insulin resistance because of continued flood of sugar into your body. And eventually, you won't get you'll get a complete destruction of beta cells, because your body will say, you know, I tried to quarantine the sugar, it didn't work. I tried to cut off the insulin to stop processing, it didn't work. How about this, guys? Let's just kill the pancreas. I'm not joking. Here's the cause of type 1 diabetes. And if you've heard this before, it's because you were listening to me. It will eventually be accepted. But type 1 diabetes is caused by excessive refined sugar by the fetus during pregnancy. It goes through the same thing that I just told you. The sugar in the infant's blood is the same as in the mother. So if the mother has high blood sugar, the infant does too. And it's got its own pancreas, it's got its own liver. And it say, wow, look at all this poison. It's not a food for it. It's look at all this poison that's roughing up my cell walls. And so it says, let's make ourselves insulin insensitive, and it doesn't work. It's because you've got growing tissue. You know, they're brand new cells, and they can be coerced and pushed to behave a little differently when they are in this rapidly multiplying state. And so it says, well, we can't, that didn't work. So I tell you what, why don't we go kill the beta cells in the pancreas? We got to stop this poison processing. And that's what it does. And the child is born with type 1 diabetes because they do not produce insulin. That's type 1. Now, of course, you have to be genetically predisposed for any of these things to happen. You know, I've had people laugh at me. So, oh, you know, I ate donuts my whole life and my baby wasn't born with type 1 diabetes. Yeah, I know, that's true. What about cigarette smoking? Does everybody who smokes cigarettes their whole life get cancer? And you guys know this is not true. Many people never have cancer. In fact, it's not even only like something like 20%. People can smoke and they not get cancer. They might get emphysema, but some people don't get any at all. But I also know there's some people that just smoke a couple of cigarettes a day and they get cancer, and it's directly caused from that smoking. And you know, there's other people that get lung cancer and they've never smoked at all. So come on, this is genetics here, guys. But there is a direct link between smoking cigarettes and lung cancer. Who can deny that? And I'm saying right now, there is a direct link between the mother's diet and type 1 diabetes of the baby when it's born. So, you know, if you do escape that and then you're born and you eat the junk food people eat. Now, man, there's never been so much junk food and available, and teenagers eat it. And you know what? They get type 2 diabetes. And we used to call it teenager onset diabetes. Actually, we said juvenile onset diabetes because you recognize they weren't born with diabetes. They developed during their teens, and usually after age 25, they don't have it anymore. Yeah, there's some cases where people do. We get a lot of it now, but that's most of the type 2 diabetes still today is changing. That age is getting older and older and older. So there's people coming up with 30 years old, 35, 50 that are eventually getting diabetes. It usually happens right in adolescence, again, because you've got a lot of change and cells are rapidly dividing, you're growing, you've got lots of hormones, you're very susceptible. So you get type 2 diabetes. And here's the third one, type 3 diabetes. I had myself challenged for this, the last talk I gave on that. Type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's. You just look it up, right? Anyone, Google it right now. Type 3 diabetes, or you can say Alzheimer's diabetes. You can go to the popular press, or you can get on PubMed and find out that some people are saying, hey, there's a link between diabetes and Alzheimer's. And some research, it was first coined in 2007. Type 3 diabetes. Now, we have not proved this yet because we've yet to do the experimentation. If any of you guys will send me about $8 million, I'll be very glad to finish this research. But it's our hypothesis that this long-term sugar, free radicals generation, inflammation, all through your life, you know, the fetus, adolescent, early adult, now you're in type 2. And then after a while, your body just had it. You're starting to get inflammation in the brain. Inflammation of the brain leads to Alzheimer's. The tangles, the beta secretases, and the tau proteins are just symptoms. Now, the only study that we've done, and actually someone else ended up publishing a paper on this ahead of me. That's how it happens, you know. But it means that somebody else had the same idea. They took rosmarinic acid. Rosmarinic, yeah, it's the polyphenolic that's in rosemary. Rosmarinic acid, just like myricetin is the one that's in muscadine grapes, and gave to rats with Alzheimer's, mice actually, and did scans. And son of a gun, tau protein and beta secretase greatly reduced by the addition of rosmarinic acid to the diets of these mice. So our plan is to do a human study almost identical to that, working with the University of Arizona. They have a brain institute there. We've been trying to do this test for several years, and it's basically like an Emuin product. We have given this formulation to several of our fathers, of our colleagues, and people I know here and there. Just say, hey, it's a vitamin that had Alzheimer's, and it reversed Alzheimer's. You know, they eventually do get old and die. Don't have a cure for that. But say in the last few years, people that were 85, 90, 95 years old. They had Alzheimer's, probably pretty late stage, like 2 and 3. One of them was 4. And you're right. Whoever mentioned on this talk a couple of days ago, there's not any test for Alzheimer's except to draw this doggone clock, and that's it. And then or tie your shoes. And but I had this one guy. His name, I'm not going to tell it because I didn't ask him about it. But he was a catcher for professional baseball. He was the youngest player to hit a home run in the National League. So you can see he's old. He's about, he must be 70, 80 years old. And he got banged in the head a lot during his life. But he had Alzheimer's and he had aphasia. He lost the ability to speak. And he stuttered so bad that he just completely went mute. He was so embarrassed. So I got one of his fellow ball players in the Boston Red Sox asked me to get him something, and so I just gave him some of this formula we were working on. Didn't make any claims, nothing. That's illegal. But it's not illegal to take rosmarinic acid and a couple of these other things. Anyway, he started speaking again, and he got so good that he became president of the Retired Professional Baseball Association and goes around the country giving speeches. So that's a pretty amazing story. We've got several others like that. But we're based on that work and this work with those rats, we are trying to do a human study on Alzheimer's. So that big discovery was that I really, I get to talk and I really like it. I love being a professor. I used to be one, and I see several of you smiling, and so that doesn't help. I just keep talking.
Yes.
But it's exciting to me. I love to fish and hunt and cook, and this is just as exciting to me to talk about this. It's an amazing story. So we find out that grapefruit, we're trying to, does grapefruit help weight loss? And then all of a sudden we got into this tremendous story that we have been missing a vitamin for decades, thousands of years actually, out of our diets. And then not only is it a sugar manager that without it, the body thinks we're under attack by a poison. I don't think anyone disagrees with that anymore, even the sugar companies. And then secondly, it controls inflammation just by itself, even without the sugar chaperoning. Amazing. So even if you don't worry about high blood sugar, so we're not now. So this is what we're promoting now. Anti-inflammation. Yeah, it's a carb manager, and that really will do well for you. It really will. But it's mainly an anti-inflammant. That's not really a word, as John Gluckman pointed out to me about a half a year ago. I just made it up because it was easier to say. It's an anti-inflammant instead of saying it's an anti-inflammatory product. Okay. It's an anti-inflammatory, a really powerful one. And now with this gallic acid, it's even more powerful. Gallic acid. That comes from things like oak leaves, oak galls. It's what makes the water brown in Florida and in the South. Actually, a lot of brown water, but because of the higher temperatures in the South, the waters get real brown. And it's what you actually use to tan leather. So I'm going to tell you I'm tanning your insides, but what it does before you have it in such outrageous concentrations is that it's an anti-inflammatory. It's what the Native Americans used. They would actually drink the river water knowing that it was healthy for you. And it's well known down in my part of the woods when I lived in Florida. The Seminoles would tell me, got clear spring water, as clear as you can get. That's where Zephyr Hills water comes from. It originally came out of a spring in Zephyr Hills, Florida, which is my hometown. Perfectly pure water, filtered through limestone of hundreds of feet deep. And then on the other side, you had the rivers, that are dark tea brown. And the Indians tell us, well, they drink the brown one. They drink the brown one because that was healthy. And the water, the clear spring water is refreshing, but they didn't give any health benefits, attribute any to it. So there's gallic acid in there. And so we've added gallic acid into this product, and it's just remarkable. You must all have seen the testimonials for that Emuin E. I would, two quick facts here. The amount of sugar we eat, I encourage everyone to get on a good diet. And if you diet, that's good. But I particularly like a low-carb diet, caveman diet, paleo diet. As a physiologist, it makes sense to me. We don't have an exact proof what cavemen ate, but I'm trying to get myself towards that as much as possible. Yeah, I still eat pasta and bread here and there, but I do the 80-20 rule. I behave myself 80% of the time, and then the other 20%, I just eat what's before me or enjoy a little bit of ice cream or something, and I don't beat myself to death. So I do pretty strict on the 80% of the time, and then the one day. I try to convince my wife that she'll let me date somebody else 20% of the time, and that would be good. She just doesn't go for that. I'm just joking. And the 80-20 though is really a good rule for most things. 80-20, moderation. And we ate around 4 pounds of sugar in the 1700s, 4 pounds a year. And the latest, I looked up these numbers for I'm going to talk in Manila next week. So I just looked up the latest. What do we have? We got them still just to 2016, but it's 200 pounds, 200 pounds of sugar a year. Good night, 200 pounds. That's just all these processed sugar, all these sugars.
So Dr. Ahrens, we have a carb manager, we have an anti-inflammatory or inflammatant, as Dr. Gluckman says. And in some of the research, you've also shown that it is extremely effective. Emuin is extremely effective as therapeutic effect for the gut, inhibiting H. pylori and helping to increase the upper gut and GI.
Well, that's really interesting. Those little boogers happen to have a reverse digestion than we do. And we're trying to inhibit the amount of carbs going from your stomach. We do never shut it all down, by the way. I've always say inhibit. If you completely shut down the transfer of sugars from the gut into your bloodstream, you couldn't live. And number two, you would have so much flatulence you couldn't stand it, because all those bacteria in your gut would eat up those sugars and would blow you up from the inside out. Likewise with amylase, you don't want to completely shut down the conversion of amylase starch into sugar. But these particular bugs, use a common term, they are highly dependent on glucose transporter 2. And these myristotin and quercetin basically starve them to death, cause them to starve. They're not able to transport nutrients across their membrane, which is, they have no cell wall. That's the outside of the cell. They're starved to death. And it also ends up apparently promoting certain bacteria that are beneficial to us. So there have been studies that show clearly myristotin in these levels that we were taking promote a healthy gut environment and lining. And that is another total accidental discovery. It just happens that these pylorus are very dependent on this particular transporter, and we shut it down in them. There's another really great use for these molecules are flexibility of vessels, vascular system.
Yes.
flexibility, permeability, and flexibility. The proteins that line the cell wall, and they're all protein, they're smooth muscle, where they're held together, they're made to have some flexibility. You know anyhow that muscle is flexible. If you just feel a piece of beef or something, and if you go through beef, it's got softer spots and harder spots. Those happen to do with the interstitial deposition of different tissues, but also the cell walls themselves are thicker or less thicker, and they're bound together with more or less self-cohesion factor. The muscles are flexible, but they work like that. When they contract and expand, and this flexibility is also in your blood veins and the capillaries. Some of that lining is the same, and of course, you know, it is a muscle. Blood vessels are a muscle. So all the way from your heart through the arteries, all the way down the capillaries, it's a muscle, and they contract, they constrict and contract to help with things like blood pressure, blood flow. They open up and let things in and out between them. You know, there's not actual holes, but these blood cells open up and let things get through there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is mediated, it's helped by some of these flavonoids. I mentioned on my last call that at one time hesperidin, which is the most common bioflavonoid in citrus fruit, it's the white part of citrus. That's hesperidin. It's good for you. Always have orange juice with pulp. That's what that is. So anyway, hesperidin really has a great effect on this permeability. As well, it can protect your cells from UV radiation problems. It was proposed to be a vitamin called vitamin P in the 50s, but the Cold War killed that effort because the Russians were using vitamin P, hesperidin, which is real close to myricetin, by the way. They were using hesperidin to protect their troops from atomic problems. They actually would expose humans to nuclear radiation, ionizing radiation, but they'd load them up with hesperidin and sit them in a room and see how fast they died. And the US and the Russians could not ever come together to finish making this a vitamin. But if you can Google that and look up vitamin P, it's still out there as a name. It's hesperidin. It's really a fine anti-inflammatory. It helps with heart issues, blood pressure, erectile dysfunction, anything you're having, blood flow. It's a great one. And it protects from the effects of ionizing radiation. Now we've also, I worked for a company a few years ago. We actually put that into some sunscreen, as well as gave a capsule to ingest, and you actually greatly resisted sunburn by taking this internally 24 hours ahead of going out in the sun. Pretty interesting concept. So yes, I've been talking a long time.
Yes.
Really. Get me going. I'm going.
We're right. Dr. Ahrens, thank you. We're running close to an hour here. I want to open it up to the group. Questions, comments. Please unmute yourself, and if you have any questions for Dr. Ahrens.
Yeah, I've got one. I've been working part-time, picking up kids after school and bringing to a church for after-school daycare, and they serve them all this wonderful snacks that we've been just describing that causes the blood sugars to go through the roof. And these are all like elementary school children. My question is for you, Joe, is how young can we really start kids on Emuin, and what would be the dosage? Yeah, I'm trying to get to talk to their parents so I can really do some education. I'm talking with them as I'm transporting the kids about how bad sugar is because of the flu season, and they think it's really good, and I'm talking the other way, but you know, that's a challenge, but I'm up for it.
Well, here's what you should do. When the mother's pregnant, have her take it and start the baby from day one.
Right.
So secondly, when people say, well, how old or how young? Well, it's like vitamins. So, I mean, if you would not give a kid an orange to eat, if there's some age you wouldn't give a kid an apple or an orange to eat, then don't give them Emuin. But once their immune system is stabilized and their body's figured everything out, you know, surely after 1 or 2 years, give them the product. It's just like saying, does everybody need D? Does everybody need E, F? There's ones all over, you know, there's hundreds of excellent vitamins and minerals, but they need them and they're not getting them. And the reason is, if you, Myristicin, as an example, is available in grapes, dark grapes, and it's most prevalent in muscadine grapes. Muscadine grapes. But you'd have to eat 10 pounds of them a day to get enough. 10 pounds plus drink a bunch of 2 liters of tea to get enough every day. Now, that's because before there was genetics where we were breeding crops, the natural blueberries, blackberries, all of these things, citruses, they had enough Emuin-like products, myristicin, chlorogenic acid, quercetin, etc. They had enough. It was there. But we bred them away because we made the apples bigger and the oranges bigger and bigger by being sweeter and having more water. And we didn't even know about myristicin or any of these other things. And there was a danger a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, where we were breeding vitamin C out of oranges and somebody just forgot to ask. I mean, they said, wait a second, does an orange still have enough daily dose of vitamin C? And we were going in the wrong direction, just make it sweeter, no. And somebody said, wait, what about the vitamin C? So now, when we're in a breeding program, we make sure that it has the same amount of vitamins. But nobody did that for myristicin, and they disappeared. They're gone. Secondly, if there is a trace amount, we process it away during processing. It's completely cleaned out. So that means now the last step is how much. You know, I just divide it by yourself. You know, we really set this up for an average human, 100 and, you know, that changes. The average weight of a human in the U.S. has gone up from like 140 to 190 over the last 30 years, but we actually make sure you're saturated. So we set our dose on a 200-pound person, and it's a very rough figure is for every 100 pounds, give 250 milligrams of Emuin. That'll carry you over. So, you know, we make sure that we've got 750 milligrams in a capsule because we want to make sure everybody's covered. There's all kind of people from 190 pounds up to 250 or 300 more pounds. We want to therefore make everyone to get at least 750 milligrams to saturate your body.
Right.
So it doesn't hurt though. If there's any excess Emuin, you either eliminate it through the urine or it goes to your skin where it has a great protective effects. It's really great for your skin. If people do eat too much of it, take too much, consume too much, what they will find out is their skin gets more healthy. Psoriasis goes away. They sunburn less. So the side effects are good effects. But just
Dr. Joe?
50 pounds, divide the dose in 4 for a 50-pound person.
Yep.
Dr. Joe?
Yeah.
It's John here. I just saw a piece come across the email that Emuin E is now available and being distributed in Canada. What is it that you had to go through with Health Canada to finally get it approved for use here in our country?
Well, it was a source. It's one of these, you know, there's a lot of good things government do, but and a bureaucracy is there to do the most good for the most people, but there's these 20% that fall through the cracks, and they did not like us having green tea extract. We got in trouble because we were getting chlorogenic acid. We were getting chlorogenic acid from green coffee bean extract. And they were starting to make us put a warning on the label because they were afraid it had caffeine in there. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a gross extract. This is just pure chlorogenic acid. We happen to get it from green coffee bean, but the bureaucracy said if you have green coffee bean extract, pregnant mothers and kids shouldn't have it. And we fought them, and they would not relent. So we switched over to getting it from green tea. There's chlorogenic acid in green tea. It's not as much, it's more expensive to get it out. And now this time they started complaining that these epigallate molecules have been shown to be no good for nursing mothers and babies. There's no epigallate in this. This is just pure chlorogenic acid. But in this case, we were able to finally prove we were just doing the pure molecule. It is not a gross extract. We don't have anything in there that is going to interfere with nursing mothers. So they said, okay, that's what was going on.
I've got a question, Dr. Joe. Ken Pepperdine here. We talk about the 7 gateways as far as glucose goes, but how are we dealing with fructose?
Well, we're not doing much of anything on fructose, to tell you the truth. I have not tried to shut down fructose because of a couple of reasons. It's true, though, fructose does not use these pathways. Glucose transporter 2, it doesn't use these. It's an independent, different system. And I thought the focus should be glucose because fructose by itself, or if you want to say fructose, you can. Fructose by itself is not as inflammatory as glucose at all. And secondly, most fructose, unless you're getting high fructose corn syrup, which is another issue completely by itself, most fructose you're getting is coming from as fruit sugar, and it has so many other benefits, nutrients along with it. And also, especially in raw food, it's also getting a lot of these bioflavonoids along with it. So we said, that's really not the issue. The issue here is glucose, and glucose is causing the inflammation. Fructose causes some inflammation, but nothing compared to glucose. So we went after the big cheese here.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just to follow up on the labeling for the Emuin E. So do I take it then that the warning for pregnant women and children is no longer on the Canadian Emuin?
That is my understanding, that this new batch does not have the warning.
Wow, that'd be great.
Unless I didn't
That's good.
hear that correctly in the last couple of weeks. That's my understanding.
Will that also be true for the U.S.? Because I'm looking at my label here. That was the reason for my question. It's always, how do you explain to the parents where it says pregnant and nursing women and children, keep it out of their reach?
Yeah, it is just a statement. Now, in the U.S., it's different. In the U.S., all vitamins and supplements have that statement.
Right.
Because that's just the FDA said, okay, you can make this stuff as long as there's no you must say keep them out of reach of children. Pregnant, lactating women shouldn't take them. And then the other thing you have to say is the FDA has not evaluated this product. It's every single one. So in the U.S., it's not an issue because everybody sees it all the time. In Canada, somewhere where they don't see it, you can't find it on a vitamin D supplement, but all of a sudden we have it. Well, Canada is just for things like caffeine and epigallate. And we're not even, don't even have any of those in there. But since we say green coffee bean, green, this, we have to put it there.
Excuse me, I got a bottle yesterday. It came in and it has cautions and warnings still on it. But we know that it's, and it says keep out of reach of children. So that may be temporary on it, correct? And then.
Where are you? You in Canada?
Yes, sorry.
Well, you know, I'm certainly the technical support for these issues, but I didn't interface with the authorities. I was just told that, yeah, we'd gotten to that next level. It's possible that they're the ones that are being manufactured now. You know, if they got a ruling 2 weeks ago, there's no way yours is going to be changed. The ones that are being manufactured now are going to be maybe 3 to 6 months from now.
Okay, thank you.
Warehouse stuff. So it looks like it, but no, you won't see it immediately. We'd have to get them in the pipeline. Also, right. Don't quote me on that. I said that's what I was told, but I didn't make the decision. I didn't talk to the Canadian authorities.
Dr. Joe, I've got a really quick question. I asked in Vegas, it's Jackie Boyle speaking, just in regards to getting just a really basic protocol for children to be able to give to parents, just to run by so that you can actually let them know this is why it's safe for you to actually give to your child, or this is why it's safe for you to be able to utilize whilst you're pregnant. And I know it's a grey area because you can't allow yourself to be having something in black and white, but just to be able to explain to people that have got small children that these are the reasons why it would benefit them if they chose to do that, if there's possible to have some sort of a document that's put out for that, or is that really?
It is possible. It is possible to do that. It's a good idea, and you or somebody will just have to remind me to do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're running, I don't want to take any more time, Dr. Ahrens. Any other short questions? Great. We appreciate your time, Dr. Ahrens, so much.
Well, I hope that it was the right flavor of this talk, because I was told this would be healthcare professionals.
Yes.
So I thought they wanted to have a little bit more of the science. Yet I didn't want to bore everybody to death, but you know, I'll tell you people this something. You know, I say that I'm from the you people. It's not an insult. It's right. like saying y'all, but I try to not say that. My voice gives it away anyhow. Well, listen here, y'all. We understand what myricetin, chlorogenic acid, and quercetin and gallic acid, and 10,000 other compounds. We understand what they're doing, these molecules, more than what any drug company understands their drugs are doing. Some of these drug companies don't even know what their molecule looks like. They've theorized it, but they're not sure. And they certainly have not undergone docking studies. You know, it's like Star Trek and all that coming into the land. They don't even know this. I've been to GlaxoSmithKline and Bristol Myers and start talking about the docking efficiency of some molecules, and they don't even know what I'm talking about. I was shocked. We do. You've got a good team of scientists. Of course, I'm just the guy in front, you know. There's people behind me that make me look good. And they're really good scientists. And we did things on a shoestring, you know, just like Apple and these and all of these Microsoft and people doing things in their garage in the old days. That's how we did it. We were working in a garage when we started. We had laptops and drinking beer with our feet up on the table and talking about molecules. And every now and then we come across another scientist that wasn't too much of a nerd, you know, just hang out and talk about this stuff. And eventually we got funding and we got into, did some proper laboratory work. But it was exciting those times. And we've done things that the big boys just never thought could be done. Just like little Apple, you know, beat up the world. And also the PC laughed eventually at IBM. And those big guys there who were all just boys at that time. Shame on them. The big boys. You know, it's probably what was wrong with them. They were just a bunch of big boys. And they should have had some diversity in there. And somebody said, hey, why don't we have a different viewpoint every now and then? How about that?
Yeah.
So we did that. And you can be rest assured that the science behind this is, it's light years. You can't, everyone's selling, you know, extract of Gingo, Bingo, Bongo that's got out some African desert somewhere, you know. It's under the shade of a tree that blooms every 5 years. And I came across people selling thawing water off of icebergs, and they don't know what in the world is going. Even the popular ones, even Herbalife, even the guys that are well known, they don't have any idea what's in their product. They also don't have enough of it. Chromium for weight loss. You look at that pico chromium. Go look at the scientific studies, and then, well, what does chromium really do, and how much is in these products? It's not enough. About a third. Why? Because chromium will make you throw up. You can't take a physiologically active dose to lose weight. So under a controlled environment, scientists give people chromium and they do lose weight. But in the real world, if you took that much chromium, you'd just throw up all the time. So people put chromium in there so they can claim on the label, hey, we've got chromium. And an average person doesn't even know what that means. And then, so, I mean, okay, that's my soapbox. You guys have a really good team. We understand this stuff like nobody understands it. And you go to Nature's Made, competitor. Go to Nature's Made and ask them, well, does this have any effect on the glucose 2 transporter? Is it subunit 1 or subunit 2 that you think is being activated? And then, okay. And also the reason that's good is because I say this stuff, and I think probably most of you don't know what I'm talking about. And I could have said glucose transporter 3, and you would have liked that too. So that's the nice thing about giving a technical talk. You just sound good.
Right. I love it.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, love it exactly. Oh, this has been wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahrens. Really appreciate your time. My internet cut out in a few places, but I just want to thank you specifically for the metaphors. Basically, I use the same method, I guess, to explain things to clients to get the sort of the science down to what a level that they can understand. And so you've just added to my arsenal of things that you can actually explain to people to get the point across in the terms that they can understand. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really try to do. It's actually what I like to do more than anything is I kind of sit there between science and laypersons. And
yes, thank you.
We love your passion. You can tell.
Yeah. I think he likes what he does.
Yes.
So I'm in Puerto Rico right now. Looks pretty good out there. You got me in the middle of a day.
Okay.
And so I'm going to go back out there. You know, I've moved to Puerto Rico permanently, by the way. A lot of people don't know that, but I was in the Bahamas, but I came to Puerto Rico to kind of be part of the economic recovery here. And I've decided to stay here. So it makes me Atlantic time, by the way. So that's really interesting because now I'm 12 hours exactly away from the IGLIN headquarters. I think probably, Jackie, I'm 12 hours exactly from you. Isn't that true? Aren't you 12 hours off? I don't remember if that's true or not. And then So I'm 12 hours, half a day away. It's right now here, it is 1:21.
Yep. Well, Doc, thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming on. And we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks.
Thanks so much, Joe. That was a great one today.
Wonderful.
Really good.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, David, for organizing.
You're welcome.
Bye, David, John, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you.